Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith. In our last video on the A7R5, I gave you guys a close-up look at the camera and went over all the new features. But today I wanted to speak about something and kind of clarify something that keeps kind of coming up in a lot of discussions I keep reading, and it keeps coming up in questions that people keep asking me as well. A lot of people look at the A1 and they think, okay, the A1 has a stacked sensor, the A7R5 does not have a stacked sensor, but wait a minute, I have no need for 30 frames per second, and they kind of leave it at that, not realizing that that stacked sensor in the A1 gives you a lot of additional features, especially features that are going to be very, very useful for someone shooting events. So I decided I would go ahead and kind of show you guys what types of things change with the stacked sensor as well. And I've taken a series of images here so I can actually kind of show you guys an example of what actually happens. So if we take a look at our images, the main thing that comes to mind about the stacked sensor in the A1 and event shooting is the silent shooting performance. So if you're going to do something like, for example, a wedding where you have to be very quiet, or any event where you have to be very quiet, you don't want that obtrusive click of the shutter, this is where the silent shooting really makes a difference. Now, when you have a camera like the A1, which currently has Sony's fastest sensor readout speed, yes, of course, that's giving us the 30 frames a second, but it's also resulting in the best silent shooting performance. The A7R5 actually has Sony's slowest sensor readout speed, which makes sense because it's the highest resolution. There's more pixels to read out. And this is not a video to hate on the A7R5, by the way. This is just a video to kind of make you guys aware that there are some trade-offs. So if we look at using the silent shutter on the A7R5, we've got a shot here with the A7R5. We're shooting at a 60th of a second. And I'm photographing a light fixture with an LED bulb that's dimmed. And this is basically what happens to me like in every type of low light type of event whenever they dim the lights. This brings back memories of many hotel banquet rooms, ballrooms where they dim the lights, and those LED bulbs, when they're dim, they have a tendency to flicker a lot. So you'll notice that if we're shooting at a 60th of a second here, we don't see too much banding. You can kind of see a little bit of banding developing, not just a ton. There's maybe some faint little bands going on here, but not a lot at a 60th of a second, because here in the United States, that is the refresh rate of these lights. That's the frequency of electricity in the United States, 60 hertz, or a 60th of a second. But yeah, as soon as we start going up to higher shutter speeds, you guys will start to see more of this banding coming through. 1/125th, 1/250th. Now, I used to get the question of, well, why would you start shooting, like events and things at very high shutter speeds? Honestly, you probably wouldn't. I am going to show you guys some faster shutter speed examples just to kind of give you an idea. But yeah, even at 1/250th of a second, if you've got the bride tossing a bouquet or something like that, you'd probably want to be somewhere around there. And you can see how we're starting to get some very significant banding here. So if I jump up one more stop, this is going to be 1/500th of a second. You guys can see this banding is getting very pronounced. And at 1,000th of a second, it's even more pronounced. Now, if we were to sort of compare and contrast this with a camera like the A1, we'll take this 1/250th of a second, because I believe that's probably the most reasonable example here. And you guys will notice that at 1/250th of a second, the A1 is completely clean. So, point proven, basically. Now, if we continue to go up to higher shutter speeds, even on the A1, you guys will notice that we still see the same thing at a 500th of a second. We're still getting a very clean result. And we'll give it one more stop increase here. Even up at 1,000th of a second, we still see no signs of banding on the electronic shutter. So that's just a testament to the very fast readout speed of the electronic shutter of the stacked sensor on this camera. It makes a huge difference for silent shooting. So that's a big thing to keep in mind. Now, another thing that has come up is Someone even asked, well, why can't, I think I saw this in another video, someone commented, and they said, well, why can't I use anti-flicker shooting on the A7R5 if I'm inside shutter or electronic shutter? And the truth of the matter is, you can't do that because, again, the A7R5 readout speed is not fast enough. The sensor cannot deliver the data fast enough, so you don't have the ability to use anti-flicker shooting at all if you're in silent mode on an A7R5. If we look at our A1 shots, even though it is doing a really good job of not having the big, large bands we saw on the A7R5 shots, you can see that there is some flicker here of the lights. You can see how the brightness and intensity of the light is changing. But because we can go in and use the anti-flicker shooting even in the electronic shutter mode, we can equalize that. So if you guys notice these shots here, they have no type of anti-flicker shooting turned on, but whenever we turn that setting on, you can see how it's a bit more consistent with the brightness of the light, because it's able to time the refresh of the light and basically fire when the light is at peak brightness. And again, it can do this in electronic shutter because of the STAX sensor's fast readout speed. Another area where you're going to notice a difference is in rolling shutter performance. And no, I'm not talking about rolling shutter for video. I'm speaking of rolling shutter for stills. So if you start to pan the camera quickly, you guys can see here, these are all shots. I'll go over to these actually. Let's see, well, I guess we'll start with the A1 shots first. If we go and look at these, you can see I've got the camera on a tripod and I'm just panning the camera back and forth while I'm shooting. And that way we can see if we're getting any type of rolling shutter artifacts. So yeah, you can look at these shots of the A1 here. There's basically nothing to speak of. I mean, all of these verticals pretty much look straight. We don't really see anything crazy happening. We're still at 1,000th of a second here. We're not seeing any banding from the lights either because, again, fast readout speed. Anyways, I did this for a lot of frames, and you guys can basically see the exact same results in all of these frames. Now, whenever we get over to the A7R5 images, yikes, whoa, everything is all kind of topsy-turvy here. Basically, yeah, as I'm panning this camera, it's not reading out each line, each row of pixels as quickly. So by the time it makes a complete scan of the sensor, the camera's already panned a bit. So all of our verticals are getting this sort of thing like this going on. So you guys can see that happening here. And of course, we have a lot of banding too, because we're still at 1,000th of a second under this very flickery LED light. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things going on here. Even this door frame over here is looking like it's a funhouse mirror. It's not ideal, shall we say. So that's what's happening with that. And you guys can see again here, we've got some verticals that are not so vertical. I don't think that my walls are made of rubber. So, but yeah, that's actually what's happening with that. So that's another area where we see this kind of start to manifest itself. Now, if we start thinking about some of the other things, we do kind of see this in video as well. Now, I don't really think that the STAX sensor itself, I've heard some other people that have more ability to test these things than I do mention that the stacked aspect of a sensor is not necessarily used in video. Frankly, whether it's used or not is irrelevant. Either way, if you're doing a lot of video, if you want to do like 8K video especially, you're going to notice that you see quite a significant amount of rolling shutter in video in 8K. Anyways, I'll go ahead and show you guys what I mean as far as that goes right now. Taking a look here, you'll notice this is footage from the A1 in 8K, 24p, 420. There's a little bit of rolling shutter, but it's not too terrible. Also notice that the field of view is still relatively wide. Going over to the A7R5, you notice that there is a crop. We're still in the same exact 8K, 420, 24p mode. And need I say any more? The rolling shutter is, frankly, a special kind of terrible. My lamp is totally a piece of rubber. If we look at full frame 4K mode, this is the A1. Again, you can see that there's really not that much rolling shutter. Going over to the A7R5, once again, we can see that there is significantly more rolling shutter. And by the way, this is 422 4K at 24p. Taking a look at some crop mode now, we have 4K from the A1. Again, still in 24p, 422 10 bits. Again, relatively low amounts of rolling shutter. Going over to the A7R5, the slower readout speed is obvious again. Definitely very, very pronounced rolling shutter. This is also probably why we don't see any type of 4K 120 on the A7R5. Its sensor just isn't fast enough. One final thing that's very, very important for me is how both these cameras handle flash. Now, the A7R5 continues on with Sony's tradition of using 1/250th of a second flash sync speed. On cameras in this level, this is pretty standard. We saw this on cameras like the A7R2 and the A7R3 and A7R4 and so on. So this is pretty standard fare. However, once again, thanks to that faster readout of the stack sensor, the A1 is able to do something a bit better here. If you're using the mechanical shutter and you're in full frame mode, the A1 can do 1/400th of a second flash sync speed. If you go down to crop mode, the camera actually increases that flash sync speed to 1/500th of a second, just due to the fact that the camera doesn't have as large of an area of the sensor to scan. And one extra bonus is that you can actually do up to 1/200th of a second with flash if you're in the electronic mode. So you don't actually even have to use the mechanical shutter whatsoever to use flash. So taking a look at this, and just kind of like some real life examples for me. I know you guys will notice I've got lots of A7R4 images here. I haven't had a chance to shoot as many frames with the A7R5 yet, but here's an example of me shooting outdoors with the A7R4. And again, this exact same thing would apply to the A7R5 since they have the same flash sync speed. But yes, shooting outdoors, wide aperture, I'm at 1/320th of a second, and I'm having to use high-speed sync here. Now, I know a lot of you photographers are already thinking, well, I just would use high-speed sync. The 1/400th is not that big of a deal. This gets into a whole nother topic, but long story short, anytime we use high-speed sync, we are greatly cutting down our flash power. So using high-speed sync is always a bit of a penalty. So yeah, 1/320th of a second is pretty typical. Well, that's the speed I used here, and that resulted in a high-speed sync being used. But yes, using something like the A1, being able to go up to 1/400th of a second is very, very useful for times like this where I have a very, very bright background behind my subject. Oftentimes, even if I don't have a very bright background, I might want to get a more dramatic look to the lighting and really bring down the ambient light level. And it's much, much easier to do that when you can go up to 1/400th of a second and not actually lose any flash output. So it's a big deal. 135, 1.8, one of my favorites, no doubt. Wide open, low ISO, 1/400th of a second here. So this 1/400th of a second thing makes a difference. I was in a situation where I found myself having to use an even higher shutter speed. I actually used the camera in crop mode here and used the 1/500th of a second flash sync speed. Sometimes I get sent to some locations and it's midday, and that's when I have to do the shoot. And you know, I end up in some very crappy lighting conditions. So being able to shoot at a much higher flash sync speed and not have to use high-speed sync is a big thing. If I don't have to rely on high-speed sync as much, I can get more light output out of my flashes, and that means I don't have to carry around as large of a flash. So instead of carrying a Profoto B1 or B1X, I can carry a B10 or even a A10. So this is a big deal. So yeah, the flash sync speed ends up being a big difference as well. Anyways, guys, these are just kind of some of my thoughts. Of course, as always, continue to write me in the comments below. I'm going to continue to test this camera. The next thing is to test the autofocus system more. I still have some things that I've done with that. My videos are always filmed well in advance, so if you guys are watching this video now, that means I've probably already done a lot more testing. But yes, definitely write me in the comments below, and I'm going to see about doing some more testing with the autofocus system of the A7R4. That'll be like of the A7R5. That'll be the next big thing I want to do. But if there's anything else you guys want to see, write me below for sure. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up if you like this video, and of course, don't forget to follow me on social media. I am known as Photog J the Great because I'm a very modest guy, and that's my username. Until next time, guys, this is Jeremy Smith, signing off.